Welcome to the Lighting Fires podcast, supported by Henley Business School. It is a very warm, sunny spring day in my local park. I've been listening back to this episode with Rory McLaren, and we track Rory's move from growing up in a remote part of Scotland to becoming CTO of a startup and moving into a very large corporate through an acquisition, learning to lead, learning to influence and communicate in such a different organisation. We talk about the benefits of not having a viewpoint or being able to ask stupid questions. We talk about his shift from perhaps being more of a Han Solo character to a Princess Leia. And we also get on to AI, a real passion for Rory, and he talks about his approach to learning about AI and why our kind of human powers and ability to form human relationships are still going to be so important as we learn to adapt. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to contact me, you can reach me at julie@lightingfires.co.uk or find me on LinkedIn. Welcome to the Lighting Fires podcast, Rory. Would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yep. Thank you for having me. I'll attempt to speak slower for the non-Scottish listeners and make sure that my accent doesn't overtake. So, my name's Rory McLaren. I've held various roles in tech and product, but I guess my career has been a game of two halves. As you can tell, I was born and brought up in Scotland. I lived in a little ex-mining village up on the moors in the middle of nowhere. So really how I ended up in technology and finance in the city, I can't really work out how it happened, but got bitten by tech bug as a kid. People of a certain age will remember ZX Spectrums and Atari consoles and stuff like that, and that's sort of what piqued my interest. And I ended up doing computing science at Glasgow. I started my career working for the government in Cheltenham, which is code for code.
Yeah.
Can't really talk about that, but I only lasted a year because it wasn't Aston Martins and sharp-tailored suits as I thought it was going to be. It was just mundane day-to-day activity. And then I got into, I guess, software houses, building software, solving customers' problems. And I thought that's what I was going to be doing forever because I really liked it. It was interesting. And I kind of realised that the broader the picture you have, the more levers you can pull, the more chance of success you've got. If you're further down the value chain, then by the time the thing gets to you, it might already be wrong, and the impact that you can make is limited, you know. So if you're building something with technical excellence, but it's the wrong thing, customers aren't interested, it's not really going to generate a business outcome, it doesn't really matter how well or badly you build it. And so I decided to try and expand my horizons, and that's where the second half of my career started.
Thank you. So let's move to the point where you're coming to the coaching. So tell us a bit about the role and some of the challenges you were experiencing or what you wanted to achieve.
So I'd moved to the second half of my career. I was trying to have a broader view on things, and I was Chief Technology Officer and co-founder at a startup. The startup went quite well, and we ended up getting acquired by the German stock exchange, Deutsche Börse Group. So we went from a 75-person organisation based in the City of London, fast, nimble, agile, to being part of a major part of the financial infrastructure globally, a different country, a different culture, probably more conservative. So that was quite a shock to the system, if you like. And I came in at quite a high level, I guess, for that organisation. And I was suddenly being exposed to things and asked to do things that I really didn't have any experience of. And so I thought I better work out how to do this pretty quickly. I better get a guide.
Yeah.
And that's when I approached you about the executive coaching.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I mean, that's such a huge culture shock, isn't it? To go from that kind of nimble startup to a different country's culture, plus a very conservative, probably quite slow-moving organisation.
Yeah, I've got, I guess, a funny example of the differences. When I joined Deutsche Börse, I got asked to put together a travel budget, and a number was suggested to me. And I said, I don't think the team's going to need that as a travel budget for the year. And they said, no, that's your personal travel budget. And of course, it opened my eyes up to what was possible, the advantages that you could get out of having that investment to be able to go and do those things. So it was very different, and I just didn't have the skill set or the tools to sort of cope with that.
Yeah, I completely understand that. So tell me, what were the things that you were hoping to achieve from the coaching?
I guess I needed someone who had more experience, had a broader perspective on roles within organisations to guide me. And basically, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I needed a guide to help me find out the things that I needed to learn, give me some hints on how to approach learning that. You know, you can't be taught that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely helped that I had a corporate background, both in some quite traditional industries, but also in some kind of high-tech, very fast-moving environments through Microsoft and Accenture. And I remember you saying that you wanted to develop your leadership skills, develop in a senior role. I think sometimes you were finding it a little bit hard to get things done or to feel empowered to do what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I guess thinking about personalities and people and the cultural implications. Technology is really easy. You know, computers don't answer back. You know, it's not for everyone, but you can go and get a manual, you can spend time, and typically it's deterministic. If you say A and B are inputs, you're probably going to get C as an output. And I guess it's what attracts a lot of men to those STEM subjects, because they like the engineering aspect of the technology. You know, developers are headphones on, noise cancelling, focusing on what they're doing. But then when you move to that leadership, it's about what's my personality type, what's your personality type, how do we communicate, how do we do conflict resolution, how do I lead you when I have no authority. So a lot of the time I had lateral leadership responsibility. So I think some of the work that we did around Myers-Briggs, some of the understanding different personality types, some of that interrupting the conversation, you know, so stopping to think, I know how I would receive that message, but how are they going to receive that message? Sometimes you would deliver what you saw as an opportunity to somebody, but they saw it as a burden. So it was really making me think about that. And again, it was opening my eyes to all these other possibilities about how to do things. Whereas before, when I'd been purely in tech, it was quite a simple, people are messy, tech's normally quite straightforward.
I mean, we probably could get into your point about men liking tech and the whole kind of equality issue around that, but let's not go there right now. I do think it's really interesting, isn't it, that need to learn how to influence and to communicate and to be kind of tooled up in a way to have that knowledge, so that in that moment when you're having a conversation or you need to communicate something, you're able to be present enough and use those tools and be flexible in your behaviour. I think that is something that you definitely need to learn in these corporate environments.
Yeah, I think in the modern day and age, but probably perennially, adaptability is the one superpower. Because it doesn't really matter what the situation is. If you can adapt, then that's probably better than anything else. Any static skill set. And yeah, I think having someone guide you to look at a broader picture, take a step back, that's a really helpful thing.
Yeah. If you're listening to this and you're interested in training as a coach, I can highly recommend the Professional Certificate in Executive Coaching, or even the Masters at Henley Business School. It is the best investment I have made in myself and my business. The course is led by research, so it has academic rigour, and the tools and techniques you learn are highly practical. You get the opportunities to practice, you build confidence. I also gained friendships for life, a community that's continued to support me. I can highly recommend it. So if you decide to take the plunge and contact Henley about the certificate programme, do mention the Lighting Fires podcast. What more happened in the coaching? What was useful or not, or helped you shift your thinking?
I think if no one's done coaching before, the one thing is, and this is not about you, but sort of every bit of coaching, the coach doesn't do anything. You do the thing. The coach is that frustrating person that says to you, well, what do you think that means? And then what would you do about that? They're not going to give you all the answers. No. They're not just going to say, well, you do A, then B, then C, and everything's fixed. They're going to help you understand.
Yeah.
It's having an external driver to make you examine and think through things.
Yeah.
There's also a bit of validation that's fine, that's normal, that happens.
Yeah.
I think I've got a bit of imposter syndrome with the background that I come from. When I interact with people and they're fifth generation lawyers and things like that, it can be a little bit intimidating.
Yeah.
So to have somebody say to you, that's fine, not everyone in the world is, a son or daughter of a CEO.
Yeah.
So there are normal people making their way through their careers, having to pick these things up and having to learn them. That can be quite validating as well, to get that external confirmation.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to hear you talk about what you get from coaching, because I think as much as I try to explain that to new clients, they're not always aware until perhaps quite a few coaching sessions have gone by that I'm not going to tell them how to do things. And I think sometimes they're a bit disappointed. But I think coaching is a unique experience. It's not like anything else. It's not like mentoring. It's not like counselling. Until you've experienced it, you probably can't really fully understand what it is. And it is having somebody else create time and space to facilitate your thinking. And I think that attention that the coach gives you during that time is quite a rare thing. You probably don't get it from anybody else around you in your career or in your family life. And I think those elements of it are really essential. But also, as you say, often coaches will have a relevant background that is really helpful to you. I think there's definitely a role for coaches to, when useful, provide some of that context and, as you say, tell you if something's normal and share a bit of their own relevant experience.
Yeah, I think if we draw the analogy with some sort of like physical or sports coaching, you tend to always perform better in front of the sports coach than if you're just on your own. The coach can hold you accountable. Yeah. You can say, well, what are you thinking there? What did you pick up? How did you think about presenting that? Did you even think about presenting it, or did you just blurt out, And then, of course, you can say, well, have you seen this framework, or have you considered that? Can you recognise when you're hangry? These types of things.
Yeah. And you touch on your background in Scotland. I remember right from the first coaching session, you talked about how you had this quite isolated upbringing and that you felt like that could be limiting you or holding you back. Or I remember thinking, I'm not sure it's as relevant as you think it is. Because in some ways, maybe you brought a whole new, more useful perspective from having that slightly different upbringing to others.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would agree on the different viewpoint because I didn't have a viewpoint. So I would come to things and people were like, well, what do you think about this? And I'd be like, I didn't know about it. But it meant I was like a blank sheet. I had no opinion on a lot of these things because it was completely new to me. And so I could ask the dumb question. So why do we do it like that?
Yeah.
Which I'm sure didn't ingratiate me to people all the time. But it meant that it was a clean perspective on it. I didn't just follow the pack.
Yeah.
And that maybe made me a bit chaotic or rebellious, but it meant that I didn't have that prejudgment of how things needed to be.
Yes, and that really reminds me when I was very early in my corporate career, I would go into meetings. This was back at Thames Water, and I'd be constantly thinking, why is this done like that? You know, I'm thinking all the stupid questions, but at first not having the courage to ask them. And I remember having a conversation with my dad one evening and said, I want to ask these questions, but I don't want to look stupid because I'm so new and I'm so junior. And he was like, well, maybe there's a way that you can construct those questions so it doesn't look so stupid. And so I started to work on that and thinking about how could I pose a question. And actually, I think that's probably been a real solid foundation for my career because gradually I realised that the questions I was asking were not stupid at all.
Yeah.
They were really obvious because I was new and I had this beginner's mind. And for the more experienced people in the room, they probably couldn't think like that anymore because they had so many years of this experience.
Yeah, they talk about the point that children start sort of worrying about what people think is the point that they lose that curiosity and stop asking those questions. I think it also goes to that as leaders, you've got a responsibility to have a psychological safety that people can go, this might be a stupid question, but let's just get it out there.
Yes.
If they see the leader asking stupid questions, inverted commas don't work on podcasts, but you know, if they see that and they believe that, or someone's brave and asks a stupid question and they get praised by the leader or the rest of the team for doing that, that really then creates that environment. The other thing is, if you're in an echo chamber where everybody's going, yep, that's how we do it, that's how we've always done it, let's just keep there's that adaptability again.
Absolutely, I agree, because you, like you say, the echo chamber, you can start to develop groupthink at that point. And I think a lot of leaders don't want to look stupid or be vulnerable by asking stupid questions. But actually, if you can role model that behaviour as a leader, that can really bring really good questions and a culture of innovation. So it's actually really important.
And I guess it's trickle-down behaviour as well. If I'm sitting in a session and at the end I say, so what am I missing? What could go wrong here? What haven't we thought through? That brings benefit. But then if the people in the room take that away to their teams and start exhibiting the same behaviour, everybody's engaged, everybody's thinking, we're getting the best possible opportunity for the organisation because everybody's mind is engaged and aligned to it. You know, work is a much more enjoyable experience.
Yes, absolutely, I agree. So coming back to the coaching work, what more happened in the coaching? I remember you talking, using the analogy of feeling like Han Solo from Star Wars sometimes.
Yeah, that's probably something to do with having a big spaceship or being the hero or whatever. I think it's maybe the sort of chaotic good. You know, he's the hero, but he's a bit of the anti-hero there. And he's a little bit out of place. You know, everybody else is the Empire or the Rebellion, and he's this just, you know, smuggler in between. It goes to my not feeling like I fitted in, maybe a bit of imposter syndrome, you know, wanting to be part of it, but not having had that background and not always just doing everything by the book and being a bit maybe questioning and saying, why do we need to do it like that? So yeah, I'm not sure. now whether Han Solo is the right character.
Maybe it was just the right character at the time, but then I remembered at one point during the coaching work, you then said, I want to be more than Han Solo. I think it was that shift to seeing how you could start to be doing things differently.
Yeah. I probably wanted to be calm and collected. Maybe I wanted to be Princess Leia and actually guide the rebellion and be a bit more measured. Han Solo tended to be running around shooting things a lot. And that's probably how I felt in some of my role, running around, putting out fires. And I wanted to be a bit more controlled, a bit measured. I always felt like there was probably a way of behaving that made things easier, was proactive rather than reactive. If only I could get ahead of the curve so that we were smoothly progressing through it rather than turning up and putting out fires. And there's a certain appeal sometimes to swooping in and putting out a fire, but it does get tedious.
Yeah, and it can be a bit exhausting as well.
Yeah.
And I do recall, as we worked through the coaching sessions, that you did seem to become calmer and more in control as the work we did together went on.
Yeah, I think I did. And that was definitely down to coaching. I think it's important to recognise sometimes that you can just be in a tricky situation.
Yes. Yeah.
And even with the best coach and with all the skills, it's still a difficult thing to navigate. And other times you can be doing a really mediocre job, but it just clicks and things work. But again, if you've got that coaching and the toolkit available to you, whatever environment you're in, you're going to be in the best position. You can't do anything to control the environment. So focus on the things you can control. Yeah. That's the tools that you've been given and the coaching.
Yeah. Something else I was reflecting on is that you have a voracious appetite for learning, right? So when we met, you were already talking to me about all these different books you've read and all these kind of management models that you come across. And you would often share things with me that I hadn't come across, and I would share books and ideas with you. And before the next session, you'd kind of read the books and you'd taken it all in. And this felt like this is really probably part of what makes you so successful, is that you do have that appetite and desire to learn.
Yeah, and I'm still doing that. I'm still reading books, definitely, but podcasts, YouTube, things like that, it's not just for learning how to fix a leaky pipe. There's so much knowledge out there. To borrow a phrase from a blog that I read, we've got unmetered intelligence now. So if you want to learn how to get better at something, it's probably out there. It's probably for free. Yeah. But yeah, I do find it fascinating to learn about things. Yeah. I think, though, learning it and not sharing it is criminal. By explaining it to someone else, you get something yourself out of it. But then there might be two of you practicing this particular thing, and you begin to create a cult at that point.
Well, no one's ever said that on my podcast before. Are you a business leader looking to grow performance, or a coach looking for a system your clients will value? If so, Insights Discovery might be for you. If you're a regular listener to the Lighting Fires podcast, you'll know how powerful it can be to understand how people think and make decisions. Insights Discovery is one of the world's most trusted psychometric systems. It's used by 48% of Fortune 500 companies and consistently scores above 97% in accuracy based on user feedback. Insights works because it's practical. It helps people and teams make better decisions and communicate without friction. Experience what's possible when you go from managing people to truly understanding them at www.insights.com. Is there anything more that you wanted to say about the coaching work that we did together?
I think if anybody's considering it, definitely go for it. It sounds over dramatic, but it changes the way that you're thinking. It changes the way you're behaving. And, ultimately investing in your mind and body are sort of the only two things that you can do. So plenty of people will have gym memberships and sporting coaches and all those sorts of things, but they never really address how they think about the world. So I think that was really valuable. It wasn't just the 1 hour a week that we were doing.
Yeah.
It overlapped into the rest of the time. When you think how much time you spend at work, you spend on your career and doing all that type of stuff, and the impact it can have either materially or from a psychological satisfaction point of view, it's crazy that we don't budget more to improve ourselves.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There is this sustainability to coaching. It lasts much longer than the time that you have that working relationship. And something that I realised very early on in my coaching career is that I wanted to teach people the techniques that we were using so that they would have them for longer, that they could take them away. They could, 10 years' time, they might still be able to use them, because I think you then get so much more value out of the coaching. But also for me, it's that coming back to what you've just said about if you want to learn something, you've got to be able to teach it. And I get a lot from doing that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, at this point, we are going to pick a question out of the envelope. So, if you'd like to pop your hand in and grab one of those questions.
Okay. Oh, this is in my wheelhouse. Can you think of a metaphor to describe the before and after, or the coaching experience itself? I think before the coaching, I was blinkered. I had my eye on the path ahead. I didn't know where that path was necessarily leading, the direction, what the terrain looked like. And after the coaching, I was more on a viewpoint, overlooking the terrain, much broader perspective, an understanding of, well, I could go that way or I could go another way. Over there, harder terrain, but potentially more rewards. And also, I've got a set of tools in my backpack now. Whichever path I decide to go on, I've got some tools that can help me navigate that. So I've got a rope, or I've got some provisions, or whatever. So it just gave me the viewpoint. You could choose to go back on exactly the same path, doing exactly the same as you did before, but it was now conscious. You had your eyes opened to that, and you had the tools to know if I choose that path, I can probably cope with that now.
Okay. Yeah. Is there an element of confidence in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the two parts that we spoke about, having the tools makes you feel more confident.
Yeah.
Often we would role play things and try things out. So, that gives you practice in a safe environment to then say, well, the next time I'm trying to have that difficult conversation, it isn't going to be the first time I've tried this. I can try it, with a bit of confidence.
I really like that analogy. I'm going to be using
You can have that one.
Right, so let's talk about what's next for you. And I know that we've had some really interesting conversations about AI as well. So let's get into that.
Yeah, AI definitely should be on everybody's roadmap. I know that it's probably intimidating for a lot of people. I would say, regardless of whether you're in the, fan or, non-fan of it, probably best not to ignore how it's impacting your industry, your profession, even society. And people are talking about it as the equivalent to the Industrial Revolution or Digital Revolution. I think it is, but it's more than that. AI is moving at a speed, and it will transform things, I think, at a pace different from anything else that we've seen before. So coming back to that adaptability, being aware, understanding what it can and cannot do, how it can benefit you, is going to be really important. And it's one of the few technologies that you can actually use to learn about itself. You could never do that with anything else. The internet gave you access to the information, but you still had to find it. Whereas now, in the right hands, AI tools are replacing training courses.
Yeah. I'm finding it really interesting from the point of view of the world of coaching, because there are now coach bots easily available, and I've tried some of them, and actually from a kind of transactional point of view, they're actually really useful. I've used one myself occasionally just to get myself kind of really focused on a goal and what I want to achieve, and to think about the steps towards that. I know a lot of coaches are using words like frightened and worried and nervous about how AI is going to affect the coaching profession, whether they'll have jobs in a year or 2 or 5 years' time. And we actually had Jonathan Passmore, who is a leader in the world of coaching. He's written a lot of books. He used to run the coaching part of Henley Business School, and he came to a Coaching Reading meeting, which I hosted 2 weeks ago. Coaching Reading being a community of coaches in the Reading area. And he came to talk to us about what he's finding through his research with AI. And some of the things he talked about, which gave some of the coaches hope, was that the AI can't replace the relationship that people have with their coach, and it can't replace the humour that you can sometimes have and the fun that you can have in coaching meetings, which I completely agree with. And that kind of relatable human experience is something that coaches can still share. So it was just really interesting hearing about, of course it's going to change the coaching world, but for now there's still a lot of very human elements of what coaches do that is really valuable. Yeah,
and I would say definitely in the coaching world, but in lots of other industries and professions, it's the same thing. It's the human element, the human experience that you bring to it that is powerful, unique, and makes the knowledge and the information land, right? If you have to spend 10 hours researching something, maybe you can cut that research down, which means you've got more time available for that face-to-face human bit that is really valuable. Everybody's got the story of that one teacher at school that really made a subject come to life, that made it stick in their memory. It's still a human that's learning it. So we encode things in engrams based on what's happening, right? That particular smell, that particular song that takes you back to that memory, it's a human thing that's doing that, right? And that's part of what AI lacks. But at the moment, there's nothing around that, right? So leverage it where it adds value, but recognise that there's still that piece for the human that allows you to take all that excellent information that you've now got and deliver it in a way that makes an impact. If you said, I'm going down to the local library to research a new topic and I'm going to base my research on the books that they have in the excellent branch at Caversham, that would be great, but no one's going to do that. They're going to use Google or other search engines are available, but you wouldn't dismiss that tool. The same as we don't dig roads with gangs of people with shovels anymore. We do it with machines because things evolve like that. It is just another tool. It's just that it's an incredibly powerful tool. It's also very accessible. So really leaning into it is probably the best thing.
So what's next for you, Rory?
I'm focusing on product, AI, data, technology. And they're probably merging to become the same sort of thing. I add product in there because product's probably a certain way of thinking about things. Data's going to become really important in the future. So those are the things that I'm focusing on. I'm talking to various organisations about roles in their future around where they want to take things. So I would advise people to engage in AI, but don't lose the portion of humanity. We're going to end up in either a utopian future or a dystopian future. Star Trek or Mad Max. You got to make your decisions.
I think that might be the title of the podcast. Right, thank you, Rory. Is there anything more you'd like to say before we finish?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity. I've said, if people haven't done coaching and they're considering it, give it a go. But also, if you haven't done a podcast, then it's an interesting experience. I'm not going to commit to starting my own podcast, but it's an interesting experience as well.
Yeah, good. I think it's, even for me, it continues to be a good bit of self-development doing the podcast. So we all have to keep doing new things, don't we?
Yep.
Right, thank you very much, Rory. I appreciate the conversation. As I listen back to this episode, I'm reflecting on the importance of asking stupid questions, because actually they're not always that stupid, are they? And as leaders, the importance of creating a climate where we role model asking stupid questions, we encourage it, we point out the benefits when people do it, whether that's to you as a team or for your end customer. And how actually taking really small risks has benefited one of my clients recently. She has started being brave, asking these kind of questions, and she's benefiting from it hugely, as is the top team that she's part of. So if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with somebody else who might enjoy it, and keep lighting fires.